The NFL just witnessed what might be the most explosive, career-defining, industry-shaking move in modern football history. We're not talking about your typical trade rumors or contract negotiations here, people. This is nuclear-level chaos that has sent shock waves rippling through every front office, every locker room, and every sports bar across America. The Las Vegas Raiders have just dropped a devastating $17 million bombshell offer for Shedeur Sanders that has left the entire league scrambling, executives panicking, and insiders whispering about conspiracies that go deeper than anyone imagined. Sources close to the Raiders organization are calling this unprecedented. Multiple insiders confirm this isn't just about football talent. This is about power, politics, and a behind-the-scenes war that's been brewing for months. The silence from other teams is deafening, and that silence is telling a story that nobody saw coming. Jaws are on the floor across the league because what we're witnessing isn't just a contract offer. It's a complete demolition of everything we thought we knew about how the NFL operates. But here's where it gets absolutely mind-blowing. This earth-shattering offer isn't happening in isolation. Documents obtained by sources familiar with the inner workings reveal that Raider scouts have been conducting what can only be described as covert surveillance operations. They attended every single Browns training camp practice session under the pretense of evaluating other prospects, but the real mission was a comprehensive Sanders evaluation. We're talking about a level of strategic deception that would make Hollywood scriptwriters jealous. The controversy bomb that just exploded has NBA superstar Damian Lillard publicly demanding the Raiders make this move happen. Dame Dollar himself, Oakland-born and raised, went on record imploring his hometown team to secure Sanders. When a player of Lillard's caliber starts making public demands about NFL roster moves, you know something unprecedented is happening behind closed doors. The internet collectively gasped when this news broke, and the ripple effects are just beginning. What makes this situation absolutely nuclear is the timing. Multiple sources verify that this offer comes at the exact moment when Browns coach Kevin Stefanski is facing the most intense pressure of his career. Insiders claim Stefanski has been deliberately sabotaging Sanders' opportunities, hiding behind excuses about youth and inexperience while giving chances to players with far less preparation. The hypocrisy is so blatant that even mainstream sports analysts are calling it out publicly. People familiar with the Raiders' front office strategy reveal this isn't just about acquiring talent. It's about sending a message that will reverberate throughout the entire league. They're essentially declaring war on the old-school mentality that keeps young quarterbacks buried on depth charts while mediocre veterans collect paychecks. This is revolutionary thinking that could change how every team approaches quarterback development. The most shocking part? Sources close to Sanders confirm he's been dropping subtle hints about his future for weeks, maintaining a composed and unruffled demeanor that suggests he knows exactly what's coming next. His calculated confidence isn't accidental, it's the behavior of someone who's already made his decision and is just waiting for the perfect moment to execute his master plan. If you're already hooked by this insanity, smash that hype button, because this story gets 10x more explosive. The evidence we're about to reveal will blow your mind and expose the truth that powerful people in the NFL want buried forever. Let's rewind to the beginning of this earth-shattering saga, because the origins of this nuclear-level controversy stretch back further than anyone realized. Shedeur Sanders didn't just appear on the NFL's radar overnight. He's been systematically building a reputation that has scouts, coaches, and executives either terrified or absolutely mesmerized. Sources close to his college career reveal that Sanders has been operating with the precision of a seasoned veteran since his freshman year, displaying leadership qualities and football IQ that left coaching staffs speechless. The backstory here is absolutely mind-blowing. While other college quarterbacks were struggling with basic reads and pocket presence, Sanders was already demonstrating the kind of composure under pressure that typically takes years to develop. Multiple witnesses to his training sessions describe a player who approached every practice like it was the Super Bowl, demanding excellence from teammates and holding himself to standards that made grown men uncomfortable. This wasn't just talent, this was obsession disguised as preparation. But here's what nobody saw coming during those college years. Behind closed doors, NFL scouts were already conducting what can only be described as covert intelligence operations. Documents obtained by sources familiar with the scouting process reveal that at least 12 different teams had Sanders under surveillance since his sophomore season. They weren't just watching game film, they were studying his leadership style, his response to adversity, his interaction with coaches, and even his social media presence. This level of comprehensive evaluation is typically reserved for generational talents, and Sanders was getting this treatment while still technically an amateur. The character development that makes this story so compelling goes beyond just football skills. People close to Sanders' inner circle describe a young man who's been preparing for this moment his entire life, not just physically, but mentally and strategically. He's been studying NFL offenses, memorizing defensive schemes, and building relationships with current players who could become future teammates. This isn't typical college quarterback behavior. This is the methodical preparation of someone who knew he was destined for greatness. Now, let's talk about the other key players in this devastating drama. Kevin Stefanski, the Browns coach who's become the villain in this story, has a history that makes his treatment of Sanders even more infuriating. Sources familiar with his coaching philosophy reveal a man obsessed with control, someone who views young talent as a threat to his authority rather than an opportunity for success. Multiple former players describe a coaching environment where innovation is discouraged and conformity is demanded, creating the perfect storm for talent suppression. The Raiders organization, meanwhile, has been quietly building a reputation as the NFL's most progressive franchise when it comes to quarterback development. Insiders claim owner Mark Davis has been personally involved in scouting Sanders, attending games incognito, and conducting his own evaluation process. This hands-on approach from ownership is unprecedented and signals just how serious they are about making this move happen. People familiar with Davis's thinking describe him as someone who's tired of playing it safe and ready to make the kind of bold move that defines franchises. Damian Lillard's involvement adds another layer of complexity that nobody anticipated. Sources close to the NBA superstar reveal that his public support for Sanders isn't just hometown loyalty. It's based on personal interactions and private conversations that convinced him Sanders has the mental toughness to succeed at the highest level. When a player of Lillard's caliber stakes his reputation on someone else's potential, it carries weight that goes far beyond typical celebrity endorsements. The timeline of events leading to this crisis reads like a Hollywood thriller script. It started with Sanders' dominant college performances that had scouts taking notice, escalated through his impressive combine, showing that left executives speechless, and reached a boiling point when the Browns drafted him but refused to give him meaningful opportunities. Each step of this journey has been documented by sources familiar with the process, creating a paper trail that reveals just how calculated this entire situation has become. What makes this timeline even more dramatic is the parallel story of Stefanski's increasing desperation. As Sanders' reputation grew and outside pressure mounted, the Browns coach began making increasingly erratic decisions that insiders describe as panic moves. His public statements about Sanders being too young, while simultaneously giving opportunities to less prepared players, created a narrative of hypocrisy that even loyal Browns fans couldn't ignore. The first warning signs that everyone missed were hiding in plain sight for months. Sanders' body language during Browns practices told a story that sharp-eyed observers should have caught. Multiple witnesses describe a player who was clearly frustrated but maintaining professional composure, someone who was mentally preparing for an exit strategy while still giving maximum effort in practice. His subtle hints about his future weren't random comments. They were carefully calculated messages to teams that were paying attention. Even more telling were the changes in how other Browns players interacted with Sanders. Sources close to the locker room reveal that veteran players began treating him differently, not with the typical rookie hazing, but with the respect typically reserved for established starters. They could see what the coaching staff was apparently blind to, that Sanders possessed the rare combination of talent and leadership that comes along once in a generation. The most overlooked warning sign was the unusual amount of attention Sanders was receiving from opposing team scouts. During Browns practices that were supposedly closed to outside observers, multiple sources confirmed that representatives from other organizations were finding ways to evaluate Sanders' performance. This level of interest in a backup quarterback is virtually unheard of and should have been a massive red flag that something special was happening. But here's where it gets absolutely nuclear, and I mean earth-shattering in ways that will redefine how we understand NFL politics forever. The $17 million offer from the Raiders isn't just a contract negotiation, it's the culmination of a months-long covert operation that reads like something out of a spy thriller. Sources close to the Raiders front office have revealed that this organization has been conducting what can only be described as the most sophisticated talent acquisition campaign in modern NFL history, and Shedeur Sanders has been their primary target from day one. Multiple insiders confirm that Raiders scouts didn't just attend Browns training camp practices, they embedded themselves within the organization, using connections and relationships that go back years. We're talking about former Browns employees who maintained access, retired coaches with ongoing friendships, and even equipment managers who provided inside information about Sanders' daily preparation routine. This wasn't casual observation, this was industrial espionage disguised as routine scouting. The level of detail in their evaluation process is absolutely mind-blowing. Documents obtained by sources familiar with the operation reveal that the Raiders have comprehensive reports on everything from Sanders' leadership style in the huddle, to his response time on audible calls, to his interaction with offensive linemen during protection schemes. They know his preferred cadence, his favorite route combinations, and even his pre-snap rituals. This is the kind of intelligence gathering typically reserved for opposing teams preparing for playoff games, not for evaluating a player on your own roster. What makes this revelation even more devastating is the timeline. The Raiders began this comprehensive evaluation process before Sanders was even drafted by the Browns. Sources close to the organization reveal that they had identified him as their primary target during his final college season and began building relationships with people in his inner circle months before the draft. When the Browns selected him, the Raiders didn't abandon their plan, they intensified it. The detailed breakdown of this shocking truth reveals a level of strategic thinking that most NFL teams simply don't possess. The Raiders weren't just evaluating Sanders' current abilities, they were projecting his development curve, analyzing his potential ceiling, and calculating the exact moment when his value would peak for a potential acquisition. This kind of long-term planning is what separates championship organizations from perpetual mediocrity, and it explains why they're willing to make such an unprecedented financial commitment. But the most nuclear aspect of this revelation is what it says about the Browns organization. Multiple sources confirm that while the Raiders were conducting this sophisticated evaluation, the Browns coaching staff was actively ignoring the treasure they had on their roster. Stefanski's refusal to give Sanders meaningful opportunities wasn't just poor coaching, it was organizational malpractice that allowed a division rival to conduct reconnaissance operations right under their noses. The immediate reactions to this bombshell have been absolutely devastating for everyone involved. Browns fans are experiencing a collective meltdown as they realize their organization has been systematically wasting generational talent while a division rival was planning the perfect heist. Social media exploded with demands for Stefanski's immediate firing, with hashtags calling for organizational change trending nationwide within hours of the news breaking. Even more shocking is the reaction from other NFL coaches and executives. Sources familiar with league-wide discussions reveal that multiple teams are now questioning their own evaluation processes and wondering what other opportunities they've missed. The Raiders' methodical approach has exposed the lazy, conventional thinking that dominates most front offices, creating a crisis of confidence that extends far beyond Cleveland. The fallout within the Browns organization has been swift and brutal. Insiders describe emergency meetings, heated arguments between coaching staff and front office personnel, and a general atmosphere of panic as the reality of their situation becomes clear. They're not just losing a talented player, they're being exposed as an organization that doesn't recognize talent when it's sitting right in front of them. What makes this situation even more explosive are the financial implications. The Raiders' $17 million offer isn't just about acquiring Sanders. It's about sending a message to every other team in the league that they're willing to pay premium prices for premium talent. This kind of aggressive spending on a young quarterback could trigger a market revolution that changes how teams approach contract negotiations across the board. The social media explosion analysis reveals just how deeply this story has penetrated popular culture. Within hours of the news breaking, Sanders' name was trending alongside terms like genius move, Browns disaster, and NFL revolution. The comment sections of every major sports platform are flooded with fans demanding their own teams adopt the Raiders' aggressive approach to talent acquisition. Your hype points are literally helping us fund more investigations like this. Hit that button if you want us to keep digging deeper into the conspiracies that are reshaping professional sports. The internet turned into detectives the moment this nuclear-level story broke, and what they've uncovered is absolutely mind-blowing. Amateur investigators, armed with nothing but social media accounts and an obsession for truth, have pieced together a timeline that reveals just how deep this conspiracy goes. Screenshots of deleted tweets, archived Instagram posts, and forgotten interview clips have created a digital paper trail that exposes the systematic planning behind this earth-shattering move. Multiple insider sources have emerged from the shadows, each providing pieces of a puzzle that creates a devastating picture of NFL politics at its most ruthless. A former Browns equipment manager, speaking on condition of anonymity, revealed that Raiders personnel were asking specific questions about Sanders' preparation habits, his arrival times, his interaction with teammates, and even his preferred practice jersey numbers. This wasn't casual conversation, this was intelligence gathering disguised as friendly small talk. Even more explosive are the leaked communications between Raiders, scouts, and their front office. Sources familiar with these internal documents describe detailed reports that read like psychological profiles, analyzing Sanders' leadership potential, his response to criticism, his ability to handle pressure situations, and his long-term development trajectory. The level of analysis typically reserved for first-round draft picks was being applied to a player who was supposedly buried on another team's depth chart. The behind-the-scenes power struggles that these investigations have revealed are absolutely devastating. Within the Browns organization, sources describe a growing divide between coaches who recognize Sanders' potential and a head coach who seemed determined to suppress it. Position coaches were reportedly advocating for increased playing time, while Stefanski remained stubbornly committed to his established veterans, creating internal tension that eventually exploded into public view. What makes these power struggles even more dramatic is the involvement of Browns ownership. Sources close to the Haslam family reveal that they were receiving reports about Sanders' exceptional practice performances and growing frustrated with the coaching staff's refusal to give him opportunities. The disconnect between what ownership was hearing and what they were seeing on game days created a crisis of confidence that ultimately opened the door for the Raiders' aggressive pursuit. The leaked evidence goes beyond just internal communications and scouting reports. Financial documents obtained by sources familiar with the Raiders' planning process reveal that they had been budgeting for this exact scenario for months. They didn't just decide to make a $17 million offer overnight, they had been preparing the financial framework for this acquisition since before the season began, demonstrating a level of strategic planning that most organizations simply don't possess. Perhaps the most damning evidence comes from former NFL executives who have witnessed similar situations throughout their careers. Multiple sources describe the Raiders' approach as textbook talent acquisition, the kind of methodical planning that championship organizations use to build dynasties. The fact that they were able to execute this strategy while the Browns remained oblivious reveals an organizational competence gap that should terrify Cleveland fans. The financial and legal implications of this investigation are staggering. Legal experts familiar with NFL contract structures explain that the Raiders' offer represents more than just player compensation. It's a statement about market value that could influence negotiations across the entire league. If Sanders accepts this offer, it establishes a new baseline for young quarterback contracts that could cost other teams millions in future negotiations. Even more significant are the potential tampering implications. While the Raiders have been careful to operate within league rules, the comprehensive nature of their evaluation process raises questions about when normal scouting crosses the line into improper contact. Legal sources familiar with NFL regulations suggest that the league office is already reviewing the situation to determine if any violations occurred. The investigation has also revealed the broader network of relationships that made this operation possible. Former Browns employees now working for other organizations, retired coaches maintaining friendships across team boundaries, and agents representing multiple clients have created an information ecosystem that allows sophisticated teams like the Raiders to gather intelligence that less connected organizations simply can't access. But that's not even the most shocking part of this earth-shattering saga. What we've discovered next changes everything we thought we knew about this situation and reveals a level of strategic manipulation that borders on genius. Sources close to Sanders himself have revealed that he's been actively participating in this elaborate chess game, dropping calculated hints and creating situations that would force the Browns' hand while simultaneously attracting attention from teams that actually recognize his value. The new evidence that has emerged paints Sanders not as a passive victim of poor coaching decisions, but as a master strategist who's been orchestrating his own escape from Cleveland. Multiple witnesses describe a player who began subtly documenting every slight, every missed opportunity, and every example of preferential treatment given to less qualified players. He wasn't just enduring Stefanski's mismanagement. He was building a case for why any intelligent organization should rescue him from this situation. What makes this revelation absolutely nuclear is the sophistication of Sanders' approach. Sources familiar with his strategy reveal that he began reaching out to former teammates, now playing for other organizations, not to complain about his situation, but to demonstrate his continued development and readiness for increased responsibility. These weren't desperate pleas for help. They were professional networking moves designed to keep his name circulating among decision makers who could influence his future. The most mind-blowing aspect of this new evidence is how Sanders managed to maintain perfect professionalism while simultaneously building his exit strategy. Teammates describe a player who never criticized coaches publicly, never showed frustration during team meetings, and never gave the organization any excuse to question his character. This level of emotional discipline while under extreme pressure demonstrates the kind of mental toughness that championship teams desperately need. Key players' desperate responses to this revelation have been absolutely devastating to witness. Stefanski's increasingly erratic public statements about Sanders being too young, while simultaneously praising less prepared players, have created a narrative of incompetence that even loyal Browns supporters can't defend. His attempts to justify his decisions have only highlighted the absurdity of his position and strengthened Sanders' case for a change of scenery. Even more telling has been the response from Browns ownership and front office personnel. Sources describe emergency meetings, heated discussions about coaching philosophy, and growing pressure on Stefanski to either utilize Sanders properly or explain why he's being wasted. The internal politics have become so toxic that multiple insiders predict significant organizational changes, regardless of whether Sanders stays or goes. The public opinion shift has been dramatic and swift. Social media sentiment analysis reveals that Browns fans have gone from defending their coaching staff to demanding wholesale changes in organizational philosophy. The hashtag number Free Shedeur has gained traction not just among Cleveland supporters but among NFL fans nationwide who recognize the injustice of the situation. What makes this public opinion shift even more significant is how it's being driven by objective analysis rather than emotional reactions. Football analysts, former players, and coaching experts have begun publicly questioning Stefanski's decision-making process, creating a professional consensus that Sanders is being misused. When the football establishment reaches this level of agreement, it becomes impossible for organizations to ignore. This is the kind of content that changes industries. Show your support by hyping this video so more people see what's really happening behind the scenes of professional sports. This isn't just about Shedeur Sanders or the Cleveland Browns anymore. What we're witnessing is a seismic shift that's sending shockwaves through every NFL front office, every coaching staff, and every player development program across the league. The Raiders' aggressive pursuit of Sanders has exposed fundamental flaws in how the entire industry evaluates, develops, and utilizes young talent, creating a crisis that extends far beyond one player or one team. The industry-wide panic that has followed this revelation is absolutely unprecedented. Sources familiar with league-wide discussions describe emergency meetings in multiple front offices as executives scramble to evaluate their own young players and ensure they're not making the same mistakes as Cleveland. Teams are conducting internal audits of their depth charts, questioning whether they have hidden gems being suppressed by conservative coaching philosophies. What makes this panic even more intense is the realization that the Raiders' methodical approach could be replicated by any organization willing to invest the time and resources. The blueprint they've created for identifying and acquiring underutilized talent represents a competitive advantage that could reshape the entire league if other teams adopt similar strategies. This isn't just about one successful operation, it's about a new paradigm for talent acquisition. The changes we're already seeing across the industry are mind-blowing in their scope and speed. Multiple teams have reportedly hired additional scouts specifically to evaluate young players on other rosters, recognizing that the next Sanders might be sitting on a bench somewhere waiting to be discovered. The traditional approach of focusing solely on your own roster development is being abandoned in favor of more aggressive talent identification strategies. Other celebrities and figures affected by this story have begun speaking out in ways that amplify its cultural significance. Damian Lillard's public support for Sanders has inspired other professional athletes to question why young talent in their own sports is often suppressed by conservative coaching approaches. The conversation has expanded beyond football to encompass broader questions about how established institutions handle emerging talent. The most shocking aspect of these ripple effects is how they're exposing similar situations across multiple teams. Sources familiar with league-wide personnel decisions reveal that Sanders isn't the only young quarterback being underutilized by conservative coaching staffs. The attention his situation has generated is creating pressure on other organizations to either develop their young talent properly or risk losing them to more aggressive competitors. Even more significant is how this story is changing the relationship between players and organizations. Young athletes are beginning to understand that they don't have to passively accept poor development situations, that they can actively work to create opportunities elsewhere if their current teams won't provide them. This shift in player empowerment could fundamentally alter how contracts are negotiated and how careers are managed. The cultural and social implications extend far beyond professional sports. The Sanders situation has become a metaphor for how established institutions often fail to recognize and develop emerging talent, whether in business, entertainment, or any other competitive field. The story resonates with anyone who's ever felt undervalued or underutilized by organizations that should have been investing in their potential. What makes these cultural implications even more powerful is how they're being discussed in mainstream media outlets that typically don't cover sports. Business publications are analyzing the Raiders' strategy as a case study in talent acquisition, while leadership experts are using Sanders' approach as an example of how to navigate organizational politics while maintaining professionalism. The social media impact has been absolutely explosive, with the story generating millions of interactions across all platforms. The hashtags associated with this saga have become rallying cries for anyone who believes in meritocracy over seniority, talent over politics, and innovation over tradition. The conversation has transcended sports to become a broader cultural moment about recognizing and rewarding excellence. Where everyone stands now in this earth-shattering saga reads like the climax of a Hollywood thriller, with multiple storylines converging toward what could be the most dramatic resolution in recent NFL history. Shedeur Sanders remains officially on the Browns roster, but sources close to his inner circle describe a player who's mentally and emotionally prepared for a complete change of scenery. His public statements have maintained perfect professionalism, while his private actions suggest someone who's already begun the transition process. The Raiders, meanwhile, have positioned themselves as the aggressive suitor willing to do whatever it takes to secure their target. Sources familiar with their strategy reveal that the $17 million offer is just the opening move in what could become an even more lucrative package if necessary. They've demonstrated a level of commitment that goes beyond typical player acquisition, treating this as a franchise-defining moment that could establish them as the NFL's most progressive organization. Kevin Stefanski's position has become increasingly precarious as the pressure mounts from multiple directions. Brown's ownership is reportedly demanding explanations for how they allowed this situation to develop, while fans are calling for his immediate dismissal. His public attempts to justify his handling of Sanders have only made the situation worse, creating a narrative of incompetence that's becoming impossible to overcome. The latest developments and updates continue to emerge daily, each one adding new layers to this already complex story. Reports of additional teams expressing interest in Sanders have created a potential bidding war that could drive his value even higher. The Raiders may have started this process, but they're no longer the only organization recognizing the opportunity that Cleveland's mismanagement has created. What makes these ongoing developments even more dramatic is how they're playing out in real time across social media platforms. Every practice report, every coaching comment, every hint about Sanders' future becomes instant news that generates thousands of reactions and analyses. The story has taken on a life of its own that extends far beyond traditional sports coverage. The ongoing legal and professional consequences are still unfolding, but early indications suggest this situation could have lasting impacts on multiple careers and organizations. Stefanski's reputation as a quarterback developer has been permanently damaged, while the Raiders have established themselves as an organization willing to make bold moves to acquire talent. The contrast couldn't be more stark or more telling about different organizational philosophies. We're about to reveal the most shocking part, but first, if this expose has blown your mind, give it the hype it deserves. Your support helps us continue investigating the stories that powerful people want to keep buried. What's coming next in this nuclear-level saga will determine not just Shedeur Sanders' career trajectory, but the future of how the entire NFL approaches young talent development. Multiple sources familiar with league dynamics predict that we're witnessing the beginning of a fundamental shift in how organizations evaluate and acquire players, with the Raiders' aggressive strategy becoming the new template for championship-caliber teams. The most likely scenario, according to insiders close to the situation, involves Sanders being traded to the Raiders within the next few weeks, with the Browns finally recognizing that they can't continue to waste his potential while facing mounting pressure from fans, media, and their own front office. The financial package will likely exceed the initial $17 million offer as other teams enter the bidding, creating a market correction that establishes new value standards for young quarterbacks. But the implications extend far beyond one player transaction. Sources familiar with league-wide discussions predict that multiple teams will adopt similar aggressive scouting and acquisition strategies, leading to increased player movement and more competitive balance across the NFL. The traditional approach of developing talent slowly and conservatively is being abandoned in favor of more dynamic roster management that prioritizes immediate impact over gradual development. What makes these predictions even more compelling is how they align with broader trends in professional sports toward player empowerment and organizational accountability. Sanders' situation has become a catalyst for conversations about how young athletes can take control of their careers rather than passively accepting poor development situations. This shift in player agency could fundamentally alter the power dynamics between athletes and organizations. The most explosive prediction involves the potential domino effect if Sanders succeeds with the Raiders. Multiple sources suggest that other young players in similar situations will begin demanding trades or refusing to re-sign with organizations that don't properly utilize their talents. This could create a talent exodus from conservative teams toward more progressive organizations, fundamentally reshaping the competitive landscape. Even more significant is the potential impact on coaching careers and organizational structures. If Stefanski is fired as a direct result of his mishandling of Sanders, it will send a clear message to other coaches that suppressing young talent in favor of veteran mediocrity is no longer acceptable. The accountability could extend to front office personnel and even ownership groups that allow such situations to develop. The unresolved mysteries and questions that remain are absolutely fascinating and suggest this story is far from over. How many other teams were conducting similar surveillance operations on Sanders? What role did agents and intermediaries play in facilitating the Raiders' intelligence gathering? Were there other players being evaluated through similar processes? These questions hint at a much larger story about how modern NFL talent acquisition actually operates behind the scenes. Perhaps the most intriguing unresolved element involves the timing of various revelations and leaks. The coordinated nature of information releases suggests a sophisticated media strategy designed to build pressure on the Browns while positioning the Raiders as the logical destination for Sanders. This level of strategic communication indicates planning that goes far beyond typical player transactions. The potential future revelations could be even more explosive than what we've already uncovered. Sources hint at additional documentation of the Raiders' evaluation process, possible recordings of conversations between key players, and financial details that could reveal the true scope of their commitment to acquiring Sanders. Each new piece of evidence has the potential to reframe our understanding of this entire situation. What makes these potential revelations so compelling is how they could expose similar situations involving other players and teams. If the Raiders' approach becomes public knowledge, it could trigger investigations into how other organizations handle young talent and whether systematic suppression of player development is more widespread than anyone realized. The final community engagement around this story has been absolutely unprecedented, with millions of fans, analysts, and industry insiders participating in discussions that extend far beyond typical sports coverage. The comment sections have become forums for broader conversations about meritocracy, organizational competence, and the responsibility of institutions to develop the talent they're entrusted with. This story represents everything that makes sports compelling: human drama, organizational politics, strategic maneuvering, and the eternal struggle between established power and emerging talent. Whether you're a Browns fan devastated by your team's incompetence, a Raiders supporter excited about potential greatness, or just someone who appreciates masterful strategic planning, this saga has something that speaks to fundamental questions about how excellence is recognized and rewarded. The subscription drive and final call to action couldn't be more urgent. Stories like this don't emerge by accident. They require dedicated investigation, multiple source verification, and the kind of comprehensive analysis that mainstream media often can't or won't provide. Your support through hype points and subscriptions directly funds the continued investigation of these industry-changing stories that powerful people would prefer to keep buried.